And we are live. Hello, man. What's up?
Hello.
How you been?
Has not been so long in the end, just a month.
Yeah. So I see you work out, right? That thing is for real. Oh no. We should look
Oh,
at the dust over there. If there is a lot of dust up there or not. Yeah, go to
so,
swim.
FinOps. Do you know what is FinOps, man?
No, I don't know what's FinOps.
Financial operations. So, a full new discipline created thanks to our friends AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, etc. That is to control how much you're spending and on what you're spending it and why. So, it's to answer those questions: how much, why, and how.
But it's a discipline that they created for you or you created to control them.
It has come up from the, let's say, the market itself.
Uh-huh.
There is a FinOps.org that they are trying to now standardize a little bit frameworks, but it's still very new, very, very new. And there is not a standard of how to track cost of the different resources, because in the end, it's not so easy because it's so linked with the business. So imagine that your business is selling hotels. Just to put an example
Just
that we
one,
both know.
one random choice.
So if every time that the user enters into the platform consumes a specific resource because you have to spin up something, then you obviously can control the cost based on the user base. So that will be a totally different approach of how to do all the calculation and all the stretch of the data than if you have a dedicated cluster, a dedicated instance of something very big that can absorb a number of users. So just those two different business models change everything. If you're a multi-tenant or mono-tenant.
Let me try to repeat what you just said. So the problem here, the problem in general, is to attribute cost of cloud resources to something,
to your goods.
to groups. But what you can do is either attribute cost to a group or a team that built some resource. So you have a cluster to do some computation built by that team for all the customers. Okay, that clusters, the VPN, all the access, everything is attributed to that client, to that team. Sorry. On the other hand, if you have a SaaS, maybe you have a lot of tenants that use spin up and down resources. Then you need to distribute cost among them, right? Is that one of the problems or the main problem?
If you have a mono-tenant SaaS platform, it probably could be quite easy because every time a user uses your platform, you just spin up everything for him and you know exactly how much it costs. But that's not the case today. I mean, most of the architectures of the solutions are multi-tenant. So in that case, you have a compute cluster that does processing of data 24 hours to serve your customers. How much cost do you associate to each customer? That's very difficult to do. You need to really know your business. You need to know exactly how the users act, how many, if the user, his activity influence. Exactly. So this is why it's very difficult to standardize because in every company they will have a totally different formula to calculate the COGS.
So you cannot ask
cost of goods. So it's the cost that in the end you have to sell to your product.
Sorry, but nowadays, can you just ask ChatGPT of computing the cost?
Very good. Very good. No. So we're a company mid-size. We're talking about around 100,000 resources in the cloud. They are divided into lower environments, the development environments, the production environment. You have different regions. The cost of a resource is not the same in US than in Europe, than in Australia. Everything changed. So it can get very complex very quickly. And that's why FinOps is kind of like not trending, but it's very important because in the end, many companies who are computer software companies, they sell a SaaS platform. The product is digital. You want to know what the margin you have on your product. I have a 20% margin. How you calculate that? If everything you sell is in AWS and you have an invoice of 1 million per month or whatever. So that's where the FinOps try to understand what goes to which part of the product and the platform which one you associate to R&D, which one you associate to engineering, which one is production cost. It's a topic that we could be talking for hours, but believe me, it's a mix between finance and tech, because you really need to know your business and how finance is budgeting everything and doing all the reports of the COGS for the shareholders or whoever they have to share that numbers, depending if the company is public or not, because that's official numbers. You will be audited on them too. So it's not something that you can just figure out and say, okay, we just put 20% of margin. That's not how it.
Is this something? Let's start from the. So is this something that is this a discipline that does costing, that attribute costs after the fact, or it also tries to model the cost before you build a system, right? Because you need to build the system. Or if you say, "Oh, I'm going to do a business to sell, I don't know, apples online," multi-tenant and stuff, and you need to be able to model your costs, right? A bit.
So it has to do both. When you have historical data, then of course you can predict how much it's going to cost something new. And we go to all the questions all the time. Like, hey, we have this new product that we want to sell that it consumes this amount of gigabytes and this compute. Can you tell us more or less how much it's going to cost? And then you have to go into the storage cost, compute cost, networking cost. You are going to do reservations. If you're not going to do reservations, in which region is going to be sold, how many users are going to have, a lot of variables. And in the end, you come with an estimation. And then commercial or sales use that estimation to really see more or less if they are on margin or not when they are selling on the market.
But it's good that they come to you to estimate costs, right? Because if they go ahead and just build the service or this product without
that's why it's very new, because before nobody was thinking about that. The cloud was amazing. Do you remember?
Yeah, amazing.
It was super cheap, super flexible. You will save a lot of money, and then you run a crazy processing somewhere and it costs you $500,000. So more and more they are starting to realize that this is very important to notice, and sometimes it doesn't worth it. Sometimes it doesn't worth to do a POC with a customer that the product you're going to be on loss because it's so expensive for what reason. So yeah, this is why they are trying to make this a standard. But it's very difficult to really do a standard of how you calculate cost of a company, because it's totally linked with the business model of the company.
Yeah. So how did it start? Did you wake up one day and say, "Oh, I need to attribute cost better," or someone came to you?
I inherited when I came here, and there was some rudimentary things to calculate the cost. But as always,
Excel spreadsheet.
It was worse. It was some Python scripts doing some with R, some diagram. It was really interesting. But the thing is that it was not enough, because it was just giving you more or less how much you are spending per month in each area. That's it. Now we have take that to the next level, and now we can really tell you per product an estimation of how much money that product is costing to the company. How many resources are dedicated to that. Of course, we need to do a lot of estimations based on shared resources, because you have an AKS cluster. That cost has to be divided between all the customers who are in that cluster. So this is why there is a lot of estimations and a lot of course, assumptions there.
A lot of tricky math, right? I am a mathematician. I have a degree in mathematics, but I see that when you say cluster, you occupy storage, you occupy time. It's like, how do you slice that up? It's not going to be. It's not easy, right?
You try to do an estimation of how much time one of the operations per user takes time, like it's 2 hours. Then you take the bill from Azure for this month. You see the number of hours. You take the slice of that product, the number of hours that it on average runs, and then you do your math, and you get to a number that, of course, if you sum everything, you have the cost. But as always, it's an estimation, because some months probably a customer maybe don't submit anything or don't access to anything, and another customer does more. But it's a good estimation. But still, it's an estimation.
It's a starting point.
Yeah.
And what so do you just look at the logs, or you
Oh, the
add
logs.
something to your code to track things?
So in Azure and AWS, you have actually a module of cost analysis. Depending on the platform, is more or less advanced. But that's not enough, because that tells you how much each resource costs. It tells you, it cannot try to predict you how much it's going to cost, but again, depend of everything that you have behind, it cannot tell you per product this is what it costs. So it's like a base. Then you take all that cost from Azure, AWS, from an API that they give you. You have millions of rows of everyday billing, and then you have to cross-check it with your own infrastructure. And for that, we have to or tag it or classify the subscriptions or resource groups, depending on or a mix. We do kind of a mix.
Tagging is manual.
The tagging, you have to, at the beginning was manual. Now it's automated. So when anybody creates a Terraform a resource, depending on destination, you can tag it. But one thing that has to be manual is the project. I mean, for what is the resource being used to? And there is no way that you automate that. That has to be the team who take the resources and tag it. And when we detect that something is not tagged, we go to that team and we tell them, guys, you're not tagging your resource. So it's a little bit of police job there.
The cost analysis module that you were referring to, how does it work? Is something that is provided by the cloud provider? Is written by you? Is something that you attach to the system or runs outside?
It's provided by any cloud provider. They all have a cost analysis or cost management part. It's like a module that tells you exactly how much you're going to get invoiced, first of all. So it's where you can see your invoices. So it's a financial module. So this is why not everybody is familiar with it, because a normal engineer doesn't care.
When you say module, you mean a code module, code that's running inside your service, or you mean form something?
No, it's part of the AWS or Azure platform itself. So
Okay.
you just search in your console cost module or cost analysis. You go there, and then you can see, tell me the cost per subscription, the cost of my whole tenant, how much you're going to invoice me. You can filter by category, by type of resource, etc. So it gives you some basics. But again, it's not enough. And that's where the problem comes, because imagine that you are creating a service to sell, photos in your page. People pay you and they download the high quality photos. You are not going to instantiate your cluster for every customer that logs into your platform. That doesn't make sense. So, but it's the same cost for you if you have 10 users, that you have 10 million. You have to dimension the cluster, but you have a minimum size that you need to have to run and process the images, right? So that's why it depends on where you are. We take all the data that Azure provide to us on cost, and then we do this kind of calculation based on the number of users, the operations they were doing on the system, and you come up with a number. But that's all done by us coding. So you have to download that data somewhere else.
So there are three pieces. The data that you get from cost analysis module provided by the cloud provider. You do tagging, which is something is manual, something is not. And then with the data that you generate, that you get, you might run additional computation to divide some costing across tenants if you have a multi-tenant system.
Exactly. Then you have to run your runbooks in the language you want to do aggregation of resources, group of resources, then kind of like divide the cost. You will want to have a dashboard or a report for your development environment, one for your production environment. People from finance, in the end, they don't care about the other ones. They just want to know how much it costs and if they are getting money or not. So it depends on the company. If the company is public and you are regulated by the NASDAQ, you need to publish these numbers. It's mandatory. You get audit on them. So it's not also a joke. It's that you can just do it. I'll do this estimation, because if it changes, the auditor is going to be asking you. So it's fun.
So I will tell you a joke. It's not a joke. Sorry, it's a real from a colleague, a common colleague in Expedia, but I don't think you know the guy. So in the early days, when lodging was very small, they used to do experiments. They used to create a fake hotel You have your database of hotels, of rate plans, rooms, etc. And so this friend of mine, they were building a new software which was like a driver for all the various subsystems, and he would do a lot of experiments in this hotel, which has, I don't know, test hotel, something, some unreal name. And then at some point, he was called in a meeting with the CTO and the CFO, Expedia back then, and probably was 15, 16 years ago. And he didn't know about what. And they start talking and start talking about all this money, missing money, and the quarter earnings call was about in 3 or 4 days. And then at some point, he was there as the expert, right? Not as the suspect. So when he started realizing, missing money, hotel, etc., he tried to explain them, no, this is a test hotel. This is not real money. And the CFO would say, there's no such thing as no real money. This is real money. There are real numbers. But we need to find who is doing this. Well, actually, it's me. Why I do? It's just test hotel. I do a booking. I reverse, I cancel the booking. I do a booking. I cancel the booking. It's a fake hotel. It does not exist. There's no such thing as fake money. Anyway, so
that's one example that is good, because imagine that in that case, to create a new hotel, the guy was creating new resources and or using the resources in a different way. If you have a real control of your costs, you would have seen it immediately.
Yeah.
You have seen that there is a new hotel popping out that didn't exist before, that is costing this money because of compute cost, because compute in the end is cost too. And if it has photos, it will be storage, all these things, and you see it. And now in my company, we are now in a moment where we see these things happening. Sometimes we see a little spike of cost.
What's the latency? When something weird or new happens, how long before someone catches it in your with your current system?
If we depend purely on Azure just sends you the cost every monthly. But we have other ways to detect it now, to not wait. We can call an API directly that they have and try to refresh some data weekly. But still, we're talking about days. This is not something that you do in real time, because basically Azure don't do it.
Yeah.
So if you depend on the cost, then no. This is why it's good to have other measurement in place, like have policies. People cannot create resources unless you see it, or at least in audit log, you put a policy in audit mode, and then when somebody creates something, you catch it immediately, and hey, that policy is telling me that you have not tagged your resource. What are you doing? So there are ways
what do you get? You get notification when policies are created or resources are created?
No, policies that force people to tag the resources that they create.
Oh.
They create anything without the tags and with the specific values that we say. So they must specify the environment, the business code, certain things. And even with that, sometimes we need to chase people because they put things that doesn't make sense, or they made a mistake. Some people think, this is not production. And I say, well, this operation you are doing is affecting the cost of the production product. Well, yes, then it's production. But engineer, this is the vision from finance compared with the vision of engineering. The test hotel that you were doing, if it was production, that was production cost. But probably in that moment, the engineer would have to say, this is a test. We put it as engineering.
And so do you get a stream of notifications, logs when resources are created?
You can do that by policies. Is the best way to do it. So you can create a policy that restricts or audit creation of new resources.
No, but can you get a notification when new resources are created? So you have a log of creation and destroying of resources.
Yeah, you can have that, but that's crazy because then it depends, because if we cannot check all the resources that are being created or destroyed because of the operation. So you need to kind of filter it and target it to certain areas, or cluster here or the cluster there. because operations is constantly doing maintenance. The
Oh,
other day
because
they
they
were.
migrate things, or they might do that as a normal operations.
We saw that, for example, which is interesting. So we had some reservations put in some databases that were in VMs. They were very expensive VMs, and then operations migrate those VMs to a new database version in a different VM in a different subscription because that was old. And then we saw it. It took us like a week because there's this. It was based on cost, but then suddenly we saw that these reservations that were 100% went to zero. They were not covering anything, and then the cost here went down and the cost here went up. And we're like, what is happening? And then digging, we saw this resource group that it has disappeared, and something has appeared in here on the right. It was in production, not covered by the reservation. So we catch it and we cover it. But that's the day-to-day. That's the day-to-day story.
Oh, right, because you also have reservations. Because if you rent a VM by the hour, you pay something. But if you reserve a VM for 3 years or for 1 year or whatever, you pay much less. So if
Exactly.
people,
Because the pay-as-you-go model and the
yeah.
reservations model and savings plans model, that each one it depends. And then, yeah, you have reservations for storage, for compute, and for certain services.
So I'm going to ask you a question that people don't like, but is there is are there scenarios where working in premise might be cheaper? I don't want to say easier or faster, but did you?
Yeah, of course. And we actually look into that, but because of the company size, it didn't make sense. But when you have a development environment that costs you a lot of money because your business is storing a lot of data, like a lot, we're talking about petabytes
Wow.
in the cloud.
So for a former client last year, I was looking into. We were looking at 90 petabytes on S3, 220K per month, just to keep the data, idle. And
Exactly.
which is what, 2.5 million a year. With 12 million a year, you could buy a few hard drives, right? With replication.
Yeah. So it's true that then, I mean, everything gets. I told to my team the whole time, everything is related to everything. So you can do that. The problem you might have is with regulations, because one thing,
You are becoming a philosopher, right? As you age,
everything
everything
is
is related
linked.
to everything.
But that data that you were talking about, your customer, or in our case, yeah, you can put everything on-prem. Let's say here in Switzerland, you rent a room somewhere. It costs, instead of this 500,000 per year, we can reduce it by, I don't know, to 10,000, whatever. The problem is that the data that you're storing there, maybe it's data from customers that are in US or in Australia. You cannot store that data somewhere else without permission. So then this is why people, it will be cheaper if you can control your data and you are not depending on any regulation. Because otherwise you are going to always have questions from customers. Where is my data stored? Where are the backups? Oh no, I want the backups in my country because it contains PI data or things like that. And then it becomes very, very difficult. So as always, the answer is depends.
It depends. And customers, they all create all these problems. We should get rid of customers. It's like,
If you are in a non-regulated market, so the simple answer, if you don't care where the data is stored because you don't have personal data stored, which usually is not the
yeah.
case, if that will be the case, then it's much cheaper that you store the data on-prem, at least for the environments that you don't care and can really run with sample data or something like this. If you are a bigger enough company, enough size of a company that you can handle that, is much cheaper.
Yeah.
This is why I think the future with the cloud will be to go to mix environments between prem and cloud because of the cost.
Yeah.
And you see that it was LinkedIn who announced 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they say they were not gonna migrate to Azure cloud. They will continue on their prem.
Who, sorry?
LinkedIn, when they were bought by Microsoft years ago,
Oh, LinkedIn. Okay.
and they never moved to Azure. So
Yeah.
they
Go
had good
figure.
reasons. And when you are storing that customer you were mentioning, or a bank that is storing all the data in the country where they are setting, they have such a paranoia with the security. Why to put it in the cloud when it's much cheaper to put it on-prem? You have 2 data centers and that's it.
Yeah.
You need to have all the security around, but in the end, it's cheaper.
Excellent. So FinOps, all the scenario that you were describing seems very, very appropriate or somewhat appropriate to AI, right? And new stuff, finding or not. Well, tell me about that. I like that. I like that smile.
We haven't seen any usage of AI in this so far. Nothing.
Really?
Nothing. Because you can do, we have done, well, let me rephrase the statement. We have used some machine learning for the prediction of cost computation for certain customers. So that's true. But that's not the AI that you were thinking of. So you are thinking about, let's deploy a model of O2 or GPT or whatever here and try to make it. No, that's not working. You need to really know the business very well. But what we have done is machine learning algorithms that do all the data that we're talking about, the cost per customer, the amount of compute they use. You can take all the history of that data that you have, feed it into the model, and then it predicts it pretty well. And that works very well. That's how we're doing predictions.
So pure statistics without, AI inference.
All machine learning style, man. You have data, you do predictions.
Yeah.
It works pretty well, and it works. And you don't over-complexify everything. Then you don't know. You have these hallucinations from them telling you that you're gonna. So yeah.
Another not conflicting question maybe. So do the cloud providers help you in this quest of costing and finding and understanding, or do they give you tools that work well?
In Asia, that is where I have most of the experience. They help you, but they are reactive. They are not.
Sorry?
They are reactive.
Huh.
So we have found bugs on the way that they calculate cost, and then they correct it. We had a reservation that for some reason was not covering Windows machines. We don't know why. And we opened the bug, we had a long discussion with them, and in the end they corrected. And they have to do, they did the reimburse, everything were well, but they are not proactively looking into these things. And then in terms of tooling, really, really advanced tooling that allows you to, for example, the cost computation metrics, it only lasts 3 months. They only store 3 months for you. If you want to have history, you need to do it by yourself.
And what do you do? You say, do they give you the possibility to save, to store the data, or?
They give you the possibility to call an API and export all the data for your tenant. So you can. And what we do is that we store it outside, so we have history or historical data. Otherwise, you lost it after 3 months. But they will not give you the prediction analysis they will give you is just based on the consumption they see. So if they have a resource that has been consuming, 10, 20, 30, 40, they predict you that you're going to consume 100 in 3 years. Yes, very smart. But they don't have the business context, so it's also very difficult. I think they do it on purpose. They keep it to the very minimum. And then if you want to do something on top of it, you build your company, or your company finance department, they build it. But no,
you need to be patient. It's a small company. They don't have a lot of developers to write code to help you, right? And they're firing. I heard something. So the beginning of the year, they fired 2,000 people. And now they are going to fire middle management. So they want to keep people that write code, mostly. Do you write code?
Well, it's a bit monster. I with AWS, I don't know how it works, but it's true that they are also so big that some areas we really need to go in detail with somebody that is an engineer on their side. With support people from my team has been in conversations about how do you track the consumption of a compute cluster to do the reservation on that. and that can get very, very low level. So yeah, that takes time, and they are reactive. So you ask the question, they help you. If you don't ask anything, they will just invoice you, which is, I have to say, 99.9999% of the times is accurate. It's just that sometimes it's not so well documented. Like examples that we have blob storage when you move from tier to tier. It's not specified that when you are reading the data to move to another tier, they will charge you for that. So details like that, and that's not written anywhere. We found out because we have to do it. So there are details there that we complain, they improve the documentation, or they reimburse in some cases, and then that's how it goes. But if anybody is listening that works in finance in a company that has a SaaS product, I'm pretty sure they perfectly understand what we're talking about, because they will have the same headache. To understand the COGS, I want to have my COGS report of my goods of my company. I need to know the margin. I need to know how much it costs. It's very difficult to do that in SaaS.
Okay, but that you would somehow have the same problems on premise.
No.
Well, you have the cost. Well, the cost on premise is, the cost. You pay the cost, right, for everything.
A bill of the servers, and it's not a recurring cost.
It's not what, sorry?
It's not a recurring cost. You don't pay the service every month. You put it in the budget of the year.
Yeah, but you amortize them over time. So, but you control the cost, right? Well, in what cases you pay the invoices, right?
Let me put you 2 examples. You are full prem. So you put in your budget of 2025, 1 million for servers. And that includes all the servers, the racks, everything. Everything is there. Let's put it that million. At the end of the year, you need to publish your results reports at the end of the year, that because you are in the stock market in US or in Europe. To estimate your cost of product, you take how many products I've sold, how much has cost me the computation, 1 million, because that's the invoice. I divide 1 million, done.
You're done. But what you said about the issues with the multi-tenant, the issues remain, right? You have a cluster, you have a subset of your system that resides in your premise that you use for a lot of tenants. And if you need to attribute costs to the tenants to invoice them, you need to do a little bit of math.
Depends, because usually the servers will not be considered OPEX, they will consider CAPEX, and it goes different. That's it. So operational cost is part of the COGS computation. CAPEX, normally not, because it's part of the infrastructure. You don't put in your COGS report the rent of the offices where you are. So you can make it very, very simple if you have everything physical with you.
Okay.
Meanwhile, if you are in the cloud, everything is operational cost and is a recurring cost, and it varies every month, or it varies every day. So obviously you do assumptions. You're not going to go into the detail of really go accurate per day. But if you are spending $500,000 or 1 million in AWS per month, you need to know that million is not going everything into production or everything into development. You need to start doing the slicing, and it's where the run.
Yeah.
You have a server. You say, which servers are production? These 2. How much is the cost? 20,000 each one. Done. That's my cost of the year.
Well, you have energy, you have the rent for the building, you have people working in the building, the assets, but still, it's like, it's much easier, right?
It's much easier. It's like the labor cost. The labor cost for the moment is easier, because you know how many employees you have, you know the salaries. You put that on top of the COGS, and then you have your number. So it's not that it's impossible, of course, but you need to have 2 or 3 people in a company mid-size just fully dedicated into this. And with this vision that they are...
2 or 3 people, full time?
Yeah.
For costing, FinOps?
Yeah.
No, man, you are killing me. So when you say mid-size, you mean 1,000 people, 500 people?
500 to 1,000, yeah, you need 2 or 3, yeah.
So let's say 0.5%, roughly.
And the thing is that, obviously, depending on the status of the company, that people save you a lot of money. So probably it's the most profitable salary you're paid. because if nobody's watching this, your bill explodes. Because engineers, again, just think that engineers are like the creative force. They're
Yeah.
not thinking about the cost. They are just thinking about, oh, let's test this, let's do this, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You need to have somebody who is checking that, putting some boundaries, and
The
that,
babysitter. A
yeah,
guardian.
we reduce the cost 20% on the first year. We're starting with this, and we keep going on that. So you can really do a lot of stuff. And it's from stupid things like resources that are underused. So you're like, why are
Oh.
you instantiate a VM with 64 gigabytes of RAM and 32 CPUs when it's 1% used for most of the month? Just downgrade. So we downgrade it.
So
Or
wait. So you also look at usage metrics, system metrics.
yeah, of course.
Wow. Yeah, it's
I told you it can get very, very complicated very, very quickly. So
and
you
we partially talked about this last time, but there is no software that does everything, right? Because part of this is business. You need to know the business, you need to know the products, the teams, etc. So
exactly, because you need to understand how your business works, how you are invoicing the customers, and how the customers are paying you to be able to do the estimations that we're talking about. So that's so specific to each company that, I mean, maybe you could try to generalize per business model or something like that, but it will be complicated. So I'm not aware of any company who does that. I know that there are consulting firms that you hire and they come to your company and they tell you, I take a percentage of how much I save you on cost. Obviously, the company is huge, Expedia, that will be millions. We're talking about millions, but you don't have so many companies of that size that
but
are.
wait, we are a good team, right? You know finance. I write code. So this episode is sponsored by Benedetto and Jose startup that will save money. Okay, we just take I don't know what do we take? 10% of the savings. Does that sounds reasonable?
20%. Let's say 20%.
Okay, so please write us, and we will be at your company doorstep in.
But to do that, you need to spend. This is why it's a consulting firm, usually a module of something else, because you need to spend a lot of time talking to everybody.
Oh
What
boy.
is all it? You have to talk to every single layer of the organization: engineering, finance, sales, product, how they work, everything, why they are doing what they are doing, and then when you understand the business, if there is only one business, of course, if it's a bigger company,
Yeah.
it's even more complicated.
Many line of businesses.
Then you can start organizing the things, telling them, no, you need to organize this in management groups and subscriptions. We're going to put this tagging. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. But
And you are telling me that this understanding part cannot be done by AI? You take AI, you take all the emails that the company exchanged, all the documents,
of course,
everything.
we're going to give you access to the emails for sure.
Not to me, to the AI. Come on.
And done it
To
by
their
AI.
model.
No,
No?
it's not going to work now. I mean, I have not tried, but I would not even spend the time on that because it's different. So you imagine the licensing model. We'll have multiple products in our company.
Oh.
Some products have a different licensing model. One is based on consumption, one is fixed cost, another are based on users. You need to, I mean, I don't see how you can automate that.
No, not automate, but I understand this. Understand that there are three lines of businesses. One is one business model, one is another business model, etc. And give you all the information instead of talking with everybody and spending, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Would that be possible?
And 6 months?
6 months. Well,
It depends on the company. Depends on the company. But it's true that the company was a startup, as I told you in the last one. So obviously, startups they grow more organically. So you need to understand much more history. If the company is more mature, I don't know, a company that is big today and is in the cloud and has 10,000 employees, probably that company is much more mature on how they do their business, and you can speed up much more understanding because everybody will know. There's nothing to discover. Let's put it that way. But it depends. Again, it depends on the company. Maybe on a company like, I don't know, Honeywell, that is massive and it has so many lines of products, it will be incredibly complicated to try to cover the whole company. So you have to go department by department. But if they use the same clouds, let's put a company like that. Maybe they share the cloud infrastructure across all the departments, but each department has a different area of business, totally different, that has nothing to do with the other one. So you need to figure out how to organize that. And when you figure out how to organize, you need to do changes on the cloud, like moving resources here and there. And you know that sometimes that's not so easy because networking, shutting down environments, recreate environments. So it's a lot of effort and engineering. So we have, for example, the case that we discovered that there was a networking cost spike because a cluster in US was accessing a resource in Europe. We saw that in the cost, but then to move that resource to the same region and reduce that networking traffic, that it was a lot, you need to redeploy that in that region. You need engineering and operations to do that, and it's in production. So probably has to be part of the release. So you see how everything gets connected, in this, right?
Stop here, start there. Yeah, it's not. Wow.
But I have to tell you that the cool part is that you really see the whole company from when you are sitting your FinOps reports and you have them built. It's like this control of the whole company. You see everything. Anybody touch anything anywhere, you see that it changed because you will see the costs moving, and then you know that a new project has come up or that somebody has forget to do something. You really can see everything of a company. It's really interesting.
So is this your main job right now or your only job?
It's part of it.
It's part?
Cyber, FinOps, architecture.
Man, you are the boss over there. You do everything.
I wish.
When did you start this FinOps branch of activity? When?
It was 2 years ago in Sophia Genetics. Because before that, in Expedia, you remember in Expedia, we were touching this at some point.
I don't remember anything. I don't remember. I cannot be accountable for what I don't remember.
In Expedia, we were doing that with a little project and reprocessing thing that we have to put into place some dashboards, but it was really, really rudimentary. It's true that it was an isolated team. So in that case, if you remember SkyVML, it was just a team working in your subscription, doing your stuff, and then we put in production. So control the cost was super easy because you have one subscription or maybe two, and you know that the cost that goes there is for this project. So it was easy to maintain. But if you scale out to the whole company, I don't think they were doing anything like that. And then 2 years ago, this company has a multi-tenant platform. So this is why I know about all these challenges, because we went into that discussion, how with finance and with the salespeople, because they want to sell, they want to know the margin of a product that is a SaaS product. So in the end, it's a file that the customer uploads. So they need to understand if it's too cheap, if it's too expensive, if the company has a margin, if not. All that conversation, you need to have them with us. Then they decide. We just give the numbers.
Yeah. Do you know what big companies, Fortune 500 companies, what do they do to control costs? Do they develop their own?
Most of the people I know, they develop their own stuff.
How big of a team do they have? I mean, what do you know about bigger companies?
I only know about a couple more companies because of people talking about these FinOps, and they had also 2 or 3 people dedicated to it to build all the reporting and everything. But in bigger companies, I read about AWS, that actually inside AWS, the most visited page that they had in 2023 was the dashboard of the cost. Because they put as a part of the objectives of each team to not exceed certain budgets. So then the teams have to be really, really paying attention to how much they were spending. And then, so if the company has a mentality of everybody has to save cost and not go crazy, then probably the effort is much less than if you have a wild west where everybody can do whatever they want.
You're talking about AWS internal development?
Internal development, yeah.
They learn to use the cost estimator.
I read somewhere an article about that it was the internal page most visited by the engineering teams, the one with the most hits. They use Google Analytics for that, and it was the console of the cost.
Wow. So do you use that in Azure, the cost estimator or calculator?
We use our own dashboards.
Or you don't use that one?
My team are the only ones who are really checking the cost console that Azure provides to you.
Because when you need to do something new, right? You need to set up some cluster, something that you never used. Do you use the Azure cost estimator?
No. We do it ourselves. Because we know more or less how much size we will need for the VMs, for the clusters, for everything. Then we have historical data, and then we do the calculation based on that.
But maybe you need to take updated prices from the website or for those machine types or something like that.
If it's something that we have never used, yes. But since we know how much it cost in the last months or 2 years already, if somebody asks us how much it's going to cost a new cluster here, we kind of nail it now.
You have a lot of data. That's good. Wow.
It depends if they ask you for a different cloud provider. If tomorrow you ask me to deploy something in AWS or Google Cloud about something that we use in Azure, yeah, we will have to take the resources that we have, look to the equivalent of those providers, how much it costs. For that, you have to use a calculator, and then it will give you a number. That number will be with pay-as-you-go cost, without discounts, without negotiations. So obviously, it's a different number.
Yeah.
But that's how to do it.
So, any chance you can tell us some crazy anecdote that happens with, looking at the costs? You found people running some shit on, anything funny you can share without destroying the reputation of your company?
The one that I can share that it was actually very funny is a developer who had in his Visual Studio Code. So he installed a plugin that the plugin was scanning the files every second, trying to look for, I think it was something about the code optimization. I don't remember the plugin, what it is. The thing is that the guy had that plugin to a blob storage in Azure. So yeah, because they mount files that they have in Azure, they mount it on the laptop to analyze them, but they are really mounted in a blob storage, so they are in Azure. Every read costs money. It was not a hot thing, it was in cool. Anyway, the thing is that we saw a bill of $1,000 for one single day because this guy had this plugin installed on his machine just sitting there. And then when we saw it very quickly because we received the alert that this kind of like was spiking, that we saw it and like, what is happening? Why this source group is suddenly costing from $2 per day to $1,000 per day, per day. We're talking about day, yeah?
So you saw that after a week, after a month?
We saw that after a week, that somebody was doing that or did that during 2 days. It was not the whole day. 2 days, we had the spike. And then we investigate, and then we find out that it was this thing, so we have to restrict it. But it was kind of funny because it shows you how, without even the developer knowing it,
how easily
it was costing a lot of money.
It was costing a lot of money just to do something that.
Because
reading some files here and there.
This is why I'm telling you. Coming back to the question before, would you save more time, more cost on-prem? It depends. But if you have people that are doing this kind of like experimental things, you have a server on-prem, what could happen? That they overload it? Okay, fine. But at least it's not costing you. Imagine that instead of this guy, suddenly all the people have done that for a week. What is the bill? $100,000 just because somebody made a mistake? What do you do after that? You cannot go to Azure and tell them, hey, can you give me back the money? No, you pay.
Yeah. The costing for cloud resources there are very good things, right? It's super easy, super quick to do POC. You want to experiment with some big cluster, with Spark, some big database, whatever. In half an hour, you can deploy whatever you want and do your experiment and decide with 10 machines, 20, 200. But at scale, it's expensive. It might be expensive because even at S3 or blob storage operations, they give you a million operations, a million gets for free, and then another million gets for, I don't know, 5 cents. You say, oh, you know what? It's cheap, and then you realize that some queries they do hundreds of billions of gets. If you want to look a lot of files, it's, I don't know, traffic. I mean, the cost for compute is easy to understand, right? I get this VM, I pay 50 cents an hour or a day or whatever. It's easy to understand.
Yeah.
API calls or gets and puts on storage.
And hidden costs that you don't see because people usually think about the storage. So you have the cost that is obvious to you. So storage, compute, networking, if it's a service, let's say that you have a database that is as a service like a Postgres, then you have the pricing. So that's the obvious one. What is not so easy to see in the cloud is when people forget to stop the resources. When people book a Postgres database to do an operation, a POC that has 64 CPUs and 1 terabyte of RAM because it's cool to have the POC done in 1 second, that's the cost that is difficult to nail because you need to understand what that person is doing to judge if that's correct or not. And that's where it goes very tricky.
Well, you have usage metrics, right? If you're using 1% of the CPU all the time, the question, that's a yellow flag.
That's where you need to enter, because in an ideal world, you don't need to worry about that. Everybody will dimension the things as they need, and that's it. But that's not the case, and that's the kind of the hidden cost that you need to chase with metrics on CPU consumption, RAM utilization, machines activity. We have VMs turning on the whole time, and they were not being used because they were for development purposes. So we shut it down at night, and we do an automation to shut it down at night. That's a very obvious one. Everybody does it everywhere. But you can have that with environments too. You have a development environment, you should automate it so it goes up when you use it and turns off when you don't use it. And that's also cost of operations, because in Prem you don't need to do that. You're free. So, yeah.
Do you have a lot of that? Do you have a lot of resources that people set up for during development for POCs and experiments, and then they forget?
We had a lot. It's all now controlled, so that's better. But
how can you mitigate that?
We did a runbook in Azure that just shuts down all the VMs in environments that are not production at night. And then people has to turn it off manually next day. And the ones that were never turned on, we know that nobody were using it.
Huh.
Again, I'm telling you, when you come in a company that has been a startup and has exploded on size, you will find many more things like this. And a company that is, let's say, more mature, like has been nice. So it's also not the same. In a company with 50,000 employees, maybe you have this, but I hope not. But imagine that you have that in a company like the size of Expedia, the engineers were creating whatever they want and they never turn it off. How many millions they were paying on AWS without knowing that it was for nothing?
Without knowing. Exactly. Yeah, but how can you, other than instructing people, what can you do? Can you turn off machines, VMs, when they are below some usage, when they are at zero after an hour or so? Maybe you can.
But again, depends on the business, because we could not do that in certain cases because some machines that were created, they were waiting for a customer to submit a request. Yeah. So in production, you cannot do that. If it's in development, yes, usually in development, you don't care. But in production, it's very, very dangerous. You need to really understand everything. That's where you spend a lot of time. But yeah, you can do everything. We create policies restricting people creating resources. We created different subscriptions with different policies on each one. So nobody can do anything there without tagging it properly. We see the cost of those subscriptions. When anybody creates something, you will receive an alert. So that's, obviously, you put control someplace, and in the end, you get your order, but it took some time. And again, depends on the size of the company. If you multiply this for 5, then you need more people.
Wow. So you have yourself that spends some time on this, plus other people full time on FinOps?
Yeah. Yeah, we have
Wow.
more people, one part-time.
Wow.
Yep.
Sounds cool, man.
And again, and one interesting detail just to close, in FinOps, if somebody's listening and is thinking about building a team, I recommend to not have all engineers. We hired a person who was coming from a finance background, not coding, just finance background, and it was incredibly useful.
Oh.
Because you need to have somebody who thinks on the numbers in a way that is not how an engineer thinks. I don't know if it makes sense, but
Like what?
engineers just want to write code.
Give me an example.
For example, we had the cost computation metrics. That is this API that Azure tells you every month with the resources that how much they have cost to you, right? So just imagine every month I send you the bill with 1,000 or 2,000 lines, or I mean it's incredibly long. It's very very big, but it tells you resource per resource in all in all your tenant, everything. Okay.
Okay.
So this person had the idea, well, why you guys are spending so much time on chasing people, what they create, what did they create? We just do a comparison month per month, resources that we get charged, ones that we don't get charged, and you have what people are creating with a month of delay, but you will get everything. And I was like, that's a very good idea. But just thinking from the cost point of view, you know?
A new cost.
So yeah, if they charge you money for it, it means that you have it. If they don't charge you money for it, it means that has disappeared. So why don't you do a report doing deltas on that, and then you have all the resources of your company inventoried, and you know who is using it. That's a good idea. So we did it. I mean, that was a good, but there are many other details, like the way people think about it, how you organize the data. When you have a lot of finance data and you need to organize it, people who has been working as financial controllers are much better at that thinking than an engineer. So just to finish in an upside note, you need to have a multicultural and multidisciplinary team, not only engineers.
Or you can hire us. You can hire us, Benedetto and Jose, and we'll come. We'll take a flight tomorrow morning, and we'll come to you.
20% of the savings.
20 now. Okay, we already increased our. I think 20% is a decent, is a decent ask. Wow. So you think you will go on with this FinOps, or you will you focus yourself on cyber security, or will do both?
Again, as I'm telling you, everything is also related, because the cyber also has an implication on cost, and we get questions on that. So if you want to add a new software for endpoints that is going to charge you based on the storage you have, who is the best department to know how much are you spending in storage? Finance department. So that's who we're doing estimation. So you are deploying Microsoft Defender for endpoint or Defender for storage. Then you need to know. Plus, we need to control how much that is costing, because in the end, you need to provide to finance the cost of the cyber operations, how much will the companies investing on security, etc. So FinOps makes sense with everything. It's just that it's a very big company. I would say that maybe makes sense that it's a full dedicated team without having multiple hats. But again, it's related to everything. You can have it it makes more sense that it's in architecture, because you will need to probably define governance rules for the whole company based on the cost.
Yeah.
So this is why it's where probably makes more sense. But it could be anywhere. Meanwhile, the person who is sponsoring the team is powerful enough, like CTO, CIO, or even CEO.
Okay, well, makes sense. Interesting. Anything else we forgot to say about FinOps?
I think that's it, man. It was great. It took long.
Well, an hour. So, it's probably enough to give people a start on FinOps. Anyway, it's doable, right? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of numbers, but it's doable.
Summing it up, you need to mix knowledge of the business with technical knowledge of your cloud platform, of course, with finance knowledge. Finance knowledge is more soft. I mean, you just need to know how to do basic projections and forecasting. That's not a big deal. But the business, you really need to understand it very well.
And you cannot do this with AI. So our job is safe for now.
I'm sorry, not yet.
Not yet. Good. Hey, man, it's been great. Thank you for your insights and your knowledge and your experience.
Thanks for having me again, and hope the people get something out of this.
I hope so. I'm sure they do. Well,
sure. Thank you, man.
Until the next time.
Until next time. See you. Ciao.
Ciao.